Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. And the by-election has been held and Reform have won Runcorn and Helsby in Cheshire from the Labour Party. It's a big result. It seems like an important moment in British politics. Obviously this has been spoken about for a number of weeks now leading up to this. We knew it was going to be quite close, and you can see on the screen there just how close it was. I don't know how much detail you know, but this went to a recount. The votes were counted up. Reform were 4 ahead. They had a 4-vote lead over Labour, so because it was so tight, Labour asked for a recount, which was given, and the votes were recounted, and it actually turned out Reform had a lead of 6. So yeah, the majority now is 6, so a very, very slim majority. It's the closest by-election victory in history, or so I hear. And you can see on the screen, of course, in terms of percentage vote share, absolutely nothing to split the two, Reform and Labour, and the other rands sort of there. I'm sure there's a little bit of tactical voting that went on here as well from both Conservative, probably, and Lib Dems, who those votes for those parties temporarily lending their vote to Labour to stop Reform or try and stop Reform. Obviously that didn't work. I don't know, but I expect that's probably what's happened there. But it wasn't quite enough for Labour, and they've fallen short. And like I say, this is a significant moment. This is, of course, the first opportunity that anyone in the country has had to vote for a Westminster candidate since the general election in 2024. It's a Labour safe seat, not just based off of last year's result, but the fact that this is a seat that Labour tends to win anyway. They won this in 2019 when they had a bad showing under Jeremy Corbyn, and now the seat's gone. They've lost this seat to Reform, and it begs the question, where is safe? And I have been kind of saying that on the channel for a little while as we've looked through those Labour heartlands in Yorkshire in particular, and Greater Manchester that we've been looking at, where it wasn't areas that the Tories won in 2019, but they've been slowly but surely falling to Reform on that nowcast. So we'll just have a look. Like I say, you can see there how close it was between the two. So this was the result from 2024, and you can see how far ahead Labour were. Reform were in second, but not even close to being running Labour close by any stretch of the imagination. And look, it's a 14,700 majority there that Reform have just overturned. And actually the turnout for this was quite good. It was 46%, which is very high for a by-election. And that's interesting because normally in these scenarios a higher turnout would be bad news for a party like Reform, because a higher turnout generally means that the bigger parties, or the main parties, have managed to get their vote out, and that hasn't really been the case. Reform have managed to win despite the fact that turnout is up or quite high for a by-election. And interestingly, in the local elections that are currently going on, or the votes being counted as I make this video, please do subscribe to the channel, because there'll be a video going through all those results as they come in, probably tomorrow or in the coming days. So yeah, please do subscribe for that. But I've seen that apparently the turnout in those elections is actually up on 2021, not by much, 1 or 2%, but not less. And it has actually gone up slightly, and Reform are doing very well as it stands. Reform are doing very, very well in those local elections as well. So that's an interesting dynamic shift. And I've said on the channel for a while, for Reform to really like the touch paper and to genuinely end that two-party system, they need to tap into the disaffected, disenfranchised voters out there in the country, of whom there are millions, who didn't vote in 2024. Turnout was very low last year for a general election, and I've said it's not about necessarily winning voters from other parties. It's about winning over voters who have just basically given up on the system. And so then perhaps we're starting to see that happen with the turnout up in these local elections, and quite good in Runcorn. So there you can see just how far ahead Labour were. The majority was substantial, and Reform have overturned it. Now, interestingly, if we go to the nowcast, it's fascinating because we can see that Labour's vote share, 38.3%, predicted by the nowcast. Obviously, this hasn't been updated. This is still showing as a Labour hold. I'm sure it'll be updated soon. But Labour's vote, 38.3%, is pretty much bang on what they actually got, 38.7%. It's Reform's vote that was slightly underestimated by around about 8%, give or take. And so that's interesting. The Conservatives at 14% and the Nowcast only achieved about 7%. So, I said about tactical voting, potentially Conservatives even voting for Labour to keep Reform out, because it's a bad news story really for Reform to be beating Labour in a heartland for the Conservatives, because it pushes the narrative that Reform are trying to get out there, that they are the real opposition to Labour, and winning in a place where the Conservatives never stood a chance of winning against Labour kind of furthers that. So that narrative of tactical voting, perhaps from Tory to Labour, doesn't hold up. If Labour's vote share here has been accurately predicted and that's what they got, perhaps Conservatives did have switched in Runcorn to vote for Reform. Who knows? Liberal Democrats also slightly underperformed the Nowcast, 3% compared to 7% here in the Nowcast, and also the Greens. Surprisingly, to some extent, perhaps Green voters, although not much, only about a 1.5% in it, but perhaps some Green voters did vote for Labour, thinking that it was trying to keep Reform out. Like again, I don't know, just going on. And again, look, the Nowcast is just an estimation, isn't it? This isn't. There's nothing guaranteed about it. It's a model, and it'll be interesting. I don't know if this result affects the next Nowcast, because Reform 8% behind in Runcorn here in the Nowcast, but they've won it. Well, there's plenty of seats across the country where they're within that sort of touching distance. Neck and neck in Altrincham, and that's a bit further ahead there. But if we come through, Bury's only 5% ahead. Bury North 3% ahead. Coming around Leeds, it's a bit safer for Labour, but 3% in Leeds East. So if Runcorn's not safe and they were 8% ahead, excuse me, where is safe for the Labour Party? And that's kind of something I've been saying for a little while. Where is safe for them? And probably the inner cities, but other than that, it's starting to look like everywhere else is looking a little bit fragile for them. One thing to be mentioned in that vein, though, is that this was a by-election, and therefore Reform were able to throw everything at this. If this were just a general election again, and every constituency was being elected, they couldn't have devoted as much time to Runcorn and Helsby, which wouldn't have been a top target for them, given Labour's big lead. It wouldn't have been a top target for them, I don't think. And so they've been able in this by-election to throw everything at this. Nigel Farage, the leader of Reform, has been there numerous times. Zahir Yousaf, the chairman, I believe, has been there numerous times. A lot of the big hitters from Reform had been to this constituency to campaign. I know a lot of activists came in from around the country, whereas obviously in a general election they wouldn't be able to sort of spare the time to leave their own constituency to campaign elsewhere. So you have to take that into account as well, and that certainly has contributed to Reform making up this 8% gap. But look, like I say, very significant result. So Reform are now back up to 5 MPs in the House of Commons. Obviously, in reality, it seems a bit. It's an unusual situation, really, where you don't really see it in the UK very, very often, or not really in my lifetime, where there's a party sitting in the House of Commons with 5 MPs, and realistically we know now that their support in the country should be having them on a much higher number of MPs sitting in the House of Commons. Of course, this Nowcast that came out just the other day, mentioned on the video last night, has Reform as the largest party for the first time with over 200 seats. And the way the local elections are going at the moment, we'll see, how they shake out, because a lot can change as the day goes on, the votes get counted. But the voting overnight and what's happened so far up to about 11 o'clock in the morning on the 2nd of May is that Reform are matching expectations, absolutely, if not slightly exceeding expectations. They're doing very, very well. And again, please do subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell, because there will be a video going through all of that, and we'll be comparing the predictions that I made last night to what actually happened. A bit of news other than the Runcorn while we're here, we'll just talk about it, is Greater Lincolnshire Mayor. Now, I said in that video last night, the predictions I said about how Reform have started to dominate Lincolnshire as a county in the Nowcast. We had a look at that, and Andrea Jenkins, former Conservative minister, now Reform mayor for Greater Lincolnshire, she won this very comfortably. You can see there 42% of the vote. Low turnout for this at just 30%. I think there's very little enthusiasm for these mayoral elections, to be honest with you, but a huge majority for Andrea Jenkins, just under 40,000 votes over second place Conservatives there. And the way it's going at the moment, I haven't looked in detail, but just from what I've seen on the news, Lincolnshire County Council is going much the same way. Reform doing very, very well there. Of course, I predicted that Reform would win an outright majority in Lincolnshire, so we'll see how far off that is. So just a quick video going through that Runcorn election. It is an important one. It's a big moment, and yeah, another big moment coming up when we have the full results from these county council and unitary authority elections. So please do follow the channel, and I will speak to you when we have those results in. Until then, see you in the next one.